Happy New Year to everyone. And for the brave souls who have come out, this is the beginning of our church New Year. We're going to be talking about some Advent resolutions instead of our normal January 1st New Year's resolutions. And I want to focus on staying awake. I'll get to the 3 points here in a minute. So I think as we begin Advent, I think sometimes we think, oh, Lent is the time for preparation, Advent's just a different time. But really, when these two seasons started early on in the church, Advent and Lent were both meant to be times of preparation and penance. That's why we wear purple for both seasons. And in the gospel we hear today, he says, "Stay awake, for at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." Stay awake. Be ready. Be prepared for the Lord's coming. And this is meant not to frighten us, but to show that there is a sense of urgency in this, because we've all experienced, people younger than me, sudden deaths. And as we hear in the first reading today, in the time of Noah, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and boom, when they least expected it, the floods came and only 8 people survived. And so in this season, we can get really focused on gifts and cards and food, and all those are wonderful things. But what I hate to hear 2 or 3 weeks into Advent is, I can't wait until this is over. And I'm thinking, you're missing the point. If that's how you feel, put the cards and the gifts away and focus on Jesus. And so the image I want us to think about is something that I remember so clearly. My grandparents lived in southern Illinois. We lived in Joliet. And whenever we knew that they were coming, often for Christmas or Easter, boy, did we do a house cleaning. We prepared, Mom and Dad had us to clean our rooms. Mom cooked the most amazing meal to get ready for my grandparents' arrival, scented candles all over the house. You get the point. Everything was perfect because we were preparing for honored guests. That is the kind of preparation that we should have for Jesus' arrival into our hearts. And so with that, 3 points. Wake up, prepare your house, and wait with hope. So the first one is to wake up. And obviously I'm not talking about physically waking up, but spiritually waking up. I believe it was Bishop Barron who said recently, the most unconfessed sin is probably sloth. Now, we think of sloth as just being lazy, but it's really, acedia is a better term for it, which means a spiritual laziness. Kind of going through the motions spiritually. We may be focused on all those other things very intentionally, but we're not taking our spiritual lives as serious as we should. St. Paul says in the second reading today, "It is now the hour for you to wake from sleep." And he says we need to walk not in darkness, but in the light of the Lord. So Advent is this alarm clock, if you will, reminding us that life is short, time is precious, and Jesus is coming. So St. Augustine said this. He said, "God promises forgiveness to your repentance, but he does not promise tomorrow to your procrastination." Let me repeat that. God promises forgiveness to your repentance. When you ask for forgiveness with a contrite heart, God can't wait to forgive you. But he does not promise tomorrow for your procrastination. So stop putting off for tomorrow what you can do today. It's time to wake up, and it's urgent. The second point is prepare your house. As I mentioned, what we did when we prepared our house for our grandparents, we were preparing for their coming. And that's literally what Advent means. It's a coming, it's an arrival. And of course, in the church, we believe the first coming has already happened, right? In Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, that was the arrival of Jesus in the manger in Bethlehem. The final coming is at the second coming, when Jesus returns on the clouds with the trumpets and the angels. And then we also believe that at every Mass, there's an Advent. Jesus arrives in the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity. So in the church, we talk about this already. Jesus has already come, but he's not yet here. And so we live in this kind of midst of already and not yet. And so if he says he's going to come like a thief in the night, he says this not to scare us, but to show and provoke urgency. Is your house prepared for his arrival? So think about cleaning the house. What can we do to clean our house? Of course, it's to go to confession, to do a good examination of conscience and think about what's in that house. I know in our house, we had a room where we just kind of shoved all the junk in, and Mom threatened us that if we opened that door, things would not go well. We have a lot of stuff in this house probably that isn't prepared for the arrival of the King. So one of the things we can do is to go to confession. Then Mom would set the table and invite us to help her. We are at the table of the Lord. This is the banquet feast. Maybe during Advent, if you don't already do it, go to Mass more than you do already. Obviously on Sunday, but maybe during the week as well, as a time to, set the table and to allow God's grace to take over in your hearts. We would light these candles, so to keep the fire burning, to spend time daily in prayer. We're going to have our Advent challenge again this Advent. What we're encouraging people to do and challenging you is to spend an hour this week, each week, in the Adoration Chapel. Or if you're closer to another Adoration Chapel, spend an hour. You can do 10 minutes a day or an hour at a time, 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there. But I believe that if we spend time in the presence of the Lord, he transforms our hearts. And so that's a great way that we can keep the fire, keep the candles burning for his arrival. And the last thing I would encourage is to strengthen our discipline. We talk a lot about vice, and we need to replace it with virtue. So this Advent, what can you do with better habits to make room for the King's arrival? Maybe it's turning off the TV. Maybe it is, getting enough sleep so that you're alert and ready to go to prayer. Whatever that is, maybe it's less FaceTime on your phone and spending more time in prayer. Whatever that is for you, I want you to prepare your house for the arrival of a king. St. Teresa of Avila said this: "The soul is like a castle, make it ready for the king." The soul is like a castle, make it ready for the king. Is your soul, is your castle ready for the arrival of the king? And then finally, the third point is wait with hope, not fear. So what's the difference between waiting in hope and waiting in fear? So fearful waiting is like when Mom would tell us, wait until your father gets home. We did not want to hear that phrase because we waited in fear until Dad got home for punishment. That's not what this kind of waiting is about. We want to, that kind of, I think fearful waiting may change behavior, but it does not bring freedom. It paralyzes us. But hopeful waiting is what brings freedom. It's what Isaiah describes in the first reading today, where the future nations will stream to the mountain of the Lord. That's why the altar is always elevated. Weapons will be turned into plowshares, meaning there will be peace. Can you imagine in the world, maybe in your families, in our neighborhoods, no bickering, no violence, no division, no fighting? That's what Jesus wants to bring to this world. Thy kingdom come. And so that kind of hopeful waiting was when our grandparents would come in. I remember my job as the youngest, I was always the one at the window waiting for those lights to come up the driveway. And there was just an excitement in my heart because I couldn't wait to see my grandparents. Do we have that kind of excitement, anticipation for the coming of Jesus, right? St. John Paul said this: "The future starts today, not tomorrow." This Advent, this day is a day in urgency to say, I need to change my habits. I need to change my ways. I need to get my house ready, and I need to prepare for the Lord. And so this week, let us focus on these three things. To wake up. Am I awake spiritually, or am I going through this kind of spiritual sloth? That's one of the reasons why we're encouraging an hour of adoration each week, and of course, Mass more often, confession. How am I preparing my house? You know, am I cleaning the house with confession? Am I setting the table? Am I keeping the candles burning with prayer? And then finally, am I waiting in fear, or am I waiting in hope? May this Advent season be a time of awakening, preparation, and joyful hope, because the King is coming, and he says he'll come like a thief in the night. But if we're ready, we have nothing to fear.